KP Halacha Hey in Hilchos Chametz Pesach. Rambam begins. Geshem Shemidus Atzei Ma'Kavos. So just like if he's uncircumcised, he cannot bring a korban Pesach. We'll go down below. Milasis Pesach, from bringing a korban Pesach, because an oral is forbidden to eat from the Pesach. Kach minas bono vektanim uminas kol avodo. So too, the fact of the uncircumcised children, uncircumcised slaves being dirty mektanim, whether they're adults or minors, will also impede him from bringing a korban pesach mishum, because he's obligated to circumcise them, because he's obligated, so he's obligated to circumcise them. He should circumcise for him every male. Then he can come forward to bring the korban pesach only after they're circumcised. And if he slaughters before he circumcises, pesach is possible. Amiri Korkus cites Psochim 96a, because the Mishnah cites Yevomis 70b, that the fact of circumcision of his males of his and his slaves impedes him from being a Pesach. Rashi explains that if he has a son who's old enough to be circumcised, or Eved to be circumcised, the father of the son or the Odin are forbidden to eat from the korban pesach until they circumcise him, because as himoil loy kol zocha, circumcise for him every zocha and then bring it. Rashi brings the posuk v'chol eved ish, and every slave of a person mikvas kesef u'maltam oisoy, that is acquired by his money, shall be circumcised. Then he can eat from it. And even the Eved uncircumcised impedes the owner from eating the Pesach. The caution, we have a difficulty here. Both the Gemaras that are mentioned by there, because the Mishnah because it says that Zechor Avodah from eating the Pesach. Now, writes that he can't make the Pesach, even to slaughter it. And it's slaughtered is possible. In the Gemara, the Kesef Mishnah Merikukas, we find later is also mentioned in Perek Tes Halacha Chesed Tes, all she'or gezayef and bosar Pesach loike, that if an uncircumcised person eats in the korban Pesach, he gets malchus shenema, because it says in Shmos 12:48, every uncircumcised shall not eat from it. And just like the circumcision of his sons or his avodim, his slaves, impedes him from slaughtering the Pesach, so too it impedes him from eating it. Shenema, as it says, Umalta oisoi oz yerechol boy. More questions. By his slaves, it says in the Torah that Eved cannot, when he's circumcised, then yerechol boy. It doesn't mention regarding the making of the Pesach. By his sons, it says that he has to circumcise his sons, and then he can bring it. And it doesn't there mention Ichiba. So we get more questions how we say both rules by when bringing the korban pesach is mentioned by the males, by the children, and the slaughtering is mentioned by the slaves, and he doesn't mention, and the eating is mentioned by the slaves. So the Gemara says Toshma, come in here. I can't learn from the Torah that what impedes him, only the circumcision of his males from making the korban pesach, and of his slaves from eating. How do I know that the uncircumcised slaves stop him from bringing the korban pesach, and the lack of circumcising his sons stops him from eating the pesach? So it says oz. There's a special Gzera Shova, meaning we have a special din of Gzera Shova, because by Eved it says Umaltam oisoi oz yerechol boy, and b'noi it says Himoy lo kol zocha oz yaakov lasoisoi. So therefore oz mixes the two things together, and we learn with Gzera Shova that the milas avodah impedes him from making the Pesach. Umilas Bonov stops him from eating the Pesach. Therefore, even though the Rambam writes Avodov together with the Bonoi, he brings only the Posuk, which is mentioned by the sons, because from there we learn that you can't make it. And from the Zerah we learn that you can't eat it. And he cites in Perek Tes Halacha Tes only what's regarding eating the Korban Pesach, that if the sons are uncircumcised, it also impedes them from eating the Korban Pesach. Now this Milas is Rambam emphasized that only the uncircumcised small minor children or any of his slaves, whether adult or minors, impede him. The Rima Kurka says only when the son is young, the father is prevented from bringing the Korban Pesach. But once the son has become an adult, he does not impede him, since the obligation then falls on the son, not on the father. Therefore, he mentions here only the minor sons. And so he writes in Peirush HaMeir that when the son is an adult, no one else is obligated to circumcise him rather himself. And therefore, we find in Hilchos Chametz that he also infers from the Rambam that a father is obligated to circumcise his son when they are small. The Hilchos Chametz judges if a person can eat the Korban Pesach in a situation where his son was born circumcised, or he replaced the foreskin, or when he did the milah, but he didn't do the priya of removal of pushing back the foreskin. But the obligation of his slaves remains even when the slave is an adult. And the Hilchos Chametz says this is why the Rambam says in Hilchos Milah that it's a mitzvah to say on the master to circumcise his slave. He doesn't mention whether the slave is adult or not, and there's never an obligation on the slave as such. If he slaughtered them before, if he slaughtered the Korban Pesach before he circumcised them, even though he circumcised them afterwards, the Pesach is possible. The Orach Laner cites the Gemara in Zvochim that every place that it says Chukah, that it means it stops. It's something absolute. In Pesach it says therefore this always applies. And he adds that the Hilchos Chametz also says so. From that Gemara in Yevomis, the questions certainly his slaves you can have when he's doing the Pesach. He didn't have an eved that he had to circumcise, and therefore he could have brought it. And between the slaughtering of the Pesach to the eating, he brought an eved, and he's chayav to circumcise it right away. Therefore, the odoin is impeded from eating a Pesach, even though he could have he had a right to slaughter the Korban Pesach. But by his son, why do you need a posuk to tell us he can't eat the Pesach? If he had a son before 8 days, then he can't. He knows he can't bring the Korban Pesach. That it cannot be that he's obligated to do his son after the making of the Pesach. That can't happen. That should be then that he suddenly knows about it. The Orach Laner cites that the Gemara could be possible when the son didn't have to do bris at the time of the Pesach, and now by the time of the eating he's chayav, meaning the son was sick, and you have to wait 7 days afterwards, and therefore the time of the circumcision never happened. Thus, if he became well at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at the time that they brought the Korban Pesach, you couldn't circumcise him. Therefore, it's not considered that you had 7 days of waiting, and therefore, if the father could have brought the Pesach when the son became well, and now it's 7 days from the time he was sick, and he didn't circumcise him, we find that he is impeded from eating the Pesach, and not from by the time of making it, he was permitted to slaughter the Korban Pesach. So the Machon Nesher infers from the Gemara, we see that the father brought the Korban Pesach, and when he did it, he had a son that wasn't circumcised. Even if the Pesach was possible at the time, if it somehow the obligation came about, because if the Pesach would be kosher, the Gemara should have said that you need the posuk to a situation where you slaughtered him to tell you that he can't eat. That even though the Pesach is kosher, the posuk comes to tell the father that he can't eat from the Pesach. And since the Gemara doesn't mention it, we see that even b'di'evet, the Pesach would be possible in such a situation. That if he brought it and then his son was healed after the 7 days of healing, took 7 days from hour to hour finished after the shchita, the father would still not fulfill his obligation to bring a Korban Pesach because the son impedes him from bringing it. The Rambam continues, that the going to the mikveh of his female servants, that they have to accept when you circumcise an Eved Knani, that causes him to become a full-fledged Eved, and so too the female slave has to be circumcised. L'shem avdos, for if she was purchased, that impedes him from bringing a Pesach. This is what the Chacham know, that the immersing the female slave is similar to the circumcision of a male slave. On this the Rambam says, we find with regard to things that are different between Pesach and Mitzrayim, what happened in Egypt when they brought the Korban Pesach, and the way we bring Pesach throughout the generations. So the Kesef Mishnah cites the words, and he doesn't mention if the Ravid is coming to question or to bring a proof to the Rambam. The Arikorkas explains that maybe the Ravid wants to ask on the Rambam from this Tosefta. It says that in both Pesach Mitzrayim, Pesach Doris, that if he had slaves that weren't circumcised or maidservants that weren't immersed in a mikveh, it impedes him from eating the Korban Pesach. But as Yaakov said, Oimani, I say, this was a statement, for Pesach Mitzrayim, then Pesach Mitzrayim, it means in Pesach we were commanded to bring when they were Mitzrayim, and Pesach Doris, the intent is to Korban Pesach in all the generations. Thus, according to the Tanakhama, Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Doris are equivalent. Like the Rambam here says, even in Pesach Doris, the fact that his slaves are uncircumcised or his maidservants are untoivel, they weren't brought into the mikveh, they impedes him from making the Pesach. And from Gzeir Shava we learn that it also impedes him from the shchitas ha-Pesach. But Rabbi Yaakov says it's only in Mitzrayim. Mamshech ha-Marik. The Marik says, Yesh klal b'Gemara. We have a general rule in the Gemara. Mishnas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov kavanoki. That means that even though Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov did not say that many things, wherever he's quoted, it is a full measure and it is clean. That means the measure is correct, and the halacha is according to his position. Now the Rishonim disagree: is that only in the Mishnah or even in the Brisa and the Tosefta? Rae Gann says maybe that's what the Ravid says. Since Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov disagrees in the Tosefta, the Rambam should have said, like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that that's only in Egypt. And the Rae Gann says that maybe the Rambam is of the opinion, like the Rishonim, that when you have a disagreement in the Toseftas, we don't see the halachos like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and it applies throughout the generations. And that's what we find in the Rambam in Tfus Vilna at the bottom on the page that this is the rule of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that being codified the halacha according to him is only in the Mishnah and not in the Tosefta, as we say in many places. But Rabbi Tzal Regensburg, which we find on the Gemara Yevomis, cites that whoever wrote this, there's a disagreement in this, and it's not clear. So we still don't know why the Rambam makes it clear, according to that it's not like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Machon Nesher cites that the Gesed Mishnah says the Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is only codified when it's brought in the Mishnah but not in the Brisa. And he further brings many places that we see that halacha is according to him even in the Brisa. And he questions the one who edits the Vilna Shas, that he decided that only in the Mishnah we see the halacha like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. And furthermore, the Vilna Rambam. And furthermore, the Ma'avir writes, as we find in many places. The Sefer Yad Malachi has the question of whether the Rav is bringing proof to the Rambam or not, and says that the Rambam should have that the Rav wants to say that the Rambam should have codified the halacha like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov in the Brisa. And he also answers, maybe here the Rambam disagrees with the Rav, that in the Brisa the halacha is not like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. And another question that Rabbi Korkus states is, why did the Rav say v'chein tfilas amahoisov? It would seem to say he's only disagreeing about immersing the shvoches, but on these avodim he does not disagree. The Tosefta doesn't make any differentiation between them. According to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, you don't have to do either one by Pesach Doros. Just that from the Magia in the old editions, it would seem that the Rav had a different text in the Tosefta, that there's no disagreement. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov also agrees that the circumcision of the Eved, according to everyone, is something that impedes throughout the generations. And he only disagrees with regarding the immersion of the shvochos, the maidservants, whether it impedes by Pesach Doros. Those are in Kabbalah. This is something that we have from or transmitted by oral Torah. These words of the Rambam, the Mari Korkus cites in the Gemara Yevomis 46b, and the Posuk it says only the circumcision of the male slaves. And Chazal had an accepted oral tradition that the lack of immersion of a maid servant who was purchased. If she was born to her mother, who was already a shifra knanis, you don't have to table her, but someone that has to become a shifra knanis would also impede him from making a korban pesach. So we find in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah 3 things how Israel went to bris. In other words, they accepted Torah. The milah, circumcision, tefillah, immersion, the korban. They also brought a korban, as we find that Moshe Rabbeinu sprayed the blood on them. Now, milah impedes from making a pesach. It was already in Mitzrayim. It says in Pesach Mitzrayim that no uncircumcised male shall eat from it. Moshe Rabbeinu circumcised all of Klal Yisrael for the purpose of conversion to be Klal Yisrael. Before that, except for the Levium, they did not keep the mitzvah of Milah Mitzrayim, because on the Levium it says Uvrischo in Soiru, they kept your covenant. Utfilo, immersion, they kept in the midbar before Matan Torah, because it says V'kidashtem hayom mocha. The preparation was immersion, as it says V'kidashtem. What is that? Just like you wash your clothing, you immerse yourself in the waters. And by Korban Geras, we find it says Vayishlach Aznarim b'nei Yisrael v'yalu oilos, that everyone brought a Korban Geras. And at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when a ger wants to join Klal Yisrael, he has to also bring a Korban. just that it does not impede him. He just has an obligation to bring a korban. And by a female, all you need is the immersion and a korban, and the offering. And even a shivra knanis and an eved knani who go through gerus, that obligates them keeping the mitzvahs like a woman, the eved needs circumcision, immersion, and the shivra knanis needs only immersion, like the immersion, like changing from the category of a non-Jew to a Jew. And so a shivra knanis that didn't go to the mikveh is not a shivra knanis. She's just a goy that's held in servitude. And ever that is not circumcised is not obligated yet to keep mitzvahs as a woman. That's why somebody who was not circumcised, does not circumcise his slaves or does not immerse his maidservants, he's kept from eating a korban pesach. So Chaim Embrisk asks the question: how do you make equal a female maidservant that didn't go to the mikveh to an eved that didn't circumcise? It would seem the reason you can't eat if your slaves are uncircumcised is because it says any uncircumcised male shall not eat from it. But where does it say that a shivcha who is a non-Jewish keeps him from making a pesach? It would seem only that uncircumcised is what impedes, and not that he has a din like a goy. That's what the Chaim asks. The Chaim brings a Gemara in Yevomis that someone purchased a goy, and he's already circumcised. And let's, for example, he was an Arab before that, and he circumcised himself, but it wasn't done for the purpose of becoming a Jewish slave. The Odin cannot bring a korban pesach. It's in the Mishnah that somebody says, I will not benefit from anyone who is uncircumcised. He cannot benefit from a goy even if he circumcised himself, because he's categorized as a uncircumcised, basically as a heathen, even though he is physically circumcised. So his question that where he makes a vow, then it has to do with the person's language, and every goy is considered not Jewish or uncircumcised, even if he's circumcised. But regarding the korban pesach, how does the Gemara know that an eved, which was not circumcised for the purpose of being initiated to be an eved, impedes him from bringing a korban pesach, because he's not an eved, he's not an eved Kanani? So his answers, we learn it from a posuk, he called agoyim arelim, that all the goyim are called arelim. That's their title. Rabbi Chaim Brisk explains that Rabbeinu Chaim says the very fact that Yisrael has a din of a goy, the shivcha a din of a non-Jewish, this is a fact of oral. Even a goy who is circumcised is as if he's uncircumcised, and therefore, if anyone is oral, meaning not Jewish in the full sense of that he has to be or she has to be, then they impede him. And therefore, if somebody has an eved or a shivcha who's non-Jewish, that's as if there's oral in the house, and therefore he's prevented from bringing a korban pesach. That's why the Rambam says that the immersion of the maidservants keeps him from eating a korban pesach, just like the lack of circumcision of his male slaves. The Bnei Yisoscha explains on a concept of explanation and on Drush and Derech HaSoid, the disagreement between the Rambam and the Ravid. First, he cites the Medrash of Chazal on the Psukim and Mishlei. Tachash Sholosh Rogzo Oretz. Because of three things, the earth was angry. Tachas Eved Ki Imloch. Because of an Eved who will be king. Zu Malchus Bovel. This is what we find that in the kingdom of Bovel, Achashverosh the Eved became king. Shivcha ki tirosh gvirto, a maidservant will inherit her owner. Zu malchus Edom. And it also says that the Raven is the opinion that since Shivcha is referring to malchus Edom, and regarding Edom it says, there shall be nothing left to base Esav, and they won't accept in the future when Mashiach comes converts from them. Therefore, the immersion of Shvoches does not keep one from eating the Pesach, because the Shivcha is Malchus Edom, and they'll never be part of Klal Yisrael. Shittas Rambam is that since in the days when we are in exile, and we can take from all the nations those pure souls who want to become Jewish even from Edom, because they can join the Kedusha. Therefore, Edom can become Jewish, and therefore until Mashiach comes, they're not considered, the maidservant is not considered someone who cannot become Jewish. He brings a proof from Antoninus, that was from base Esav, that he became a ger. Therefore, the Rambam is of the opinion that the tefillah of a shivcha impedes. This is according to the Bnei Yisoscha. Then he brings derech hadrush, which is less understandable. That the Raven is of the opinion that the immersion of the maidservant, if he didn't bring her under Kanvei Shechina in Besel Mitzrayim, that would impede, because then you had to nullify the entire strength of Mitzrayim, and to take out all the sparks of Kedusha from the Shivcha to be able to become close to Kodesh, you needed immersion. But in the generations, future generations, you can say that the Shivcha's immersion does not impede, because the Avodah Zarah, which is called Shivcha, was nullified from the times he left Mitzrayim Ba'ava. That's the logic of the Rav. The Rambam is of the opinion, since HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us, we should remember the day in which He sees Mitzrayim all the days of our lives. So there's something still there, and we have to nullify this klipa, this shell of Mitzrayim, to nullify it. Therefore, even throughout the generations, the tefillah, the immersion of the shivcha, impedes, and then he goes in the derech Kabbalah. If you want to learn about it, you should look at it over there.